I traveled 2,000 miles to meet my future husband. He looked at me for 5 seconds, then told the entire town I wasn't fit to be his wife. Vernon Blackwood stood at the Pinebrook station holding flowers, his face bright with anticipation. Then I stepped down from the stagecoach, all 5'10" of me, shoulders broad from years of farm work, hands calloused and strong. His smile died. "There's been some mistake," he said, loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear. "I asked for a wife, not a draft horse." The bouquet hit the dirt at my feet. Laughter erupted. Men slapped their knees. Women whispered behind gloved hands, their eyes full of pity and scorn. Vernon turned to the crowd. "She deceived me in her letters. I won't be marrying this creature." I stood frozen, my worn carpetbag clutched in trembling hands, while 30 strangers witnessed my humiliation. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Let's continue with the story. Sheriff Maddox didn't look up from his paperwork when I entered his office. Vernon had already been there, poisoning the well. "Miss Thornton," the sheriff said, finally meeting my eyes. "Mr. Blackwood has filed a complaint. Says you misrepresented yourself in your correspondence." "I told the truth in every letter," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. He slid a paper across the desk. My own words stared back at me. "I'm a strong woman from Kansas, capable of hard work." Vernon had underlined "strong" 3 times in angry red ink. "He claims he understood this to mean your character, not your physical attributes." The sheriff's mouth twitched with barely suppressed amusement. "Mr. Blackwood paid $47 for your passage from Kansas. He wants reimbursement for fraudulent procurement of a mail-order bride." Fraudulent. Heat rose to my cheeks. I never lied about, "You have 48 hours to repay the debt." He interrupted, "If you can't produce the money, I'll have no choice but to arrest you for contract fraud." I opened my small purse, $3.20. Every penny I owned. Jail. My voice came out smaller than I intended. "This is Pinebrook. Miss Thornton, we take contracts seriously." He leaned back in his chair. "Of course, if you apologize to Mr. Blackwood publicly and agree to leave town immediately, he might be persuaded to drop the charges." Leave town with what money the stagecoach fare alone would cost more than I had. I walked out into the afternoon sun, my mind racing. 48 hours. $47. The general store owner took one look at me and shook his head before I could speak. "Vernon Blackwood's a valued customer. I can't afford to cross him." The restaurant needed a cook, but the owner's wife took in my height and wide shoulders. "Our customers expect a certain delicacy. You'd frighten them." The laundry refused me outright. "Mr. Blackwood has asked the business owners to refrain from helping you." "I'm sorry." By nightfall, I'd been turned away from every establishment in town. My stomach growled I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The boarding house had no vacancy, though I could see empty rooms through the windows. I found myself at the old livery stable at the edge of town, long abandoned since the new one was built. The door hung crooked on its hinges inside. Hay still filled some of the stalls, musty but dry. I spread my shawl over the cleanest pile I could find and sat down, drawing my knees to my chest. Mice skittered in the corners. Through gaps in the walls, I could see the warm lights of Pinebrook's homes, families gathering for supper. This was where I'd sleep tonight, in a stable, like an animal. The thought that had been pressing at the edges of my mind all day finally broke through. I could die here. If I couldn't pay Vernon, I'd go to jail. And the sheriff had made it clear Pine Brook's jail wasn't meant for women. I'd heard stories about what happened to women in frontier jails, unprotected and vulnerable. I wouldn't cry. I'd promised myself that much. But my hands shook as I pulled my threadbare blanket from my carpet bag. Somewhere in this town, Vernon Blackwood was probably dining on roast beef and potatoes, laughing about the oversized mail-order bride he'd rejected. The sheriff was enjoying his evening whiskey, and I was here with $3 to my name and 47 hours until I'd be arrested. I lay back in the hay, staring up at the rafters where barn swallows had once nested. How had it come to this? I'd been so certain that a fresh start in the West was my answer, my chance at a new life after losing everything in Kansas. The stable door creaked. I sat up fast, my heart hammering. A tall silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the rising moon. Too large to be a woman, too deliberate in movement to be a drunk stumbling home. The figure stepped inside, and I could finally make out his features, a man with a thick beard, wearing a logger's rough clothes. "I know who you are," he said quietly, "and I know somewhere you can stay. But you have to trust me." The stranger's name was Rowan McGregor. He didn't explain how he knew about my situation in a town this small. Humiliation traveled fast. He simply led me through the dark streets to a modest boarding house on the quieter end of town. "Mrs. Sarah Pemberton answered his knock, a widow in her 60s with kind eyes that widened when she saw me. "Rowan." "What?" "She needs a room," he said simply. "I'll pay for the week." He counted out $5 silver and pressed them into the landlady's weathered hand before I could protest. "Mrs. Pemberton studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Come in, dear. You look half-starved." The room was small but clean, with a real bed and a wash basin. After Mrs. Pemberton left, I turned to Rowan, who stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Something dark passed across his face. I once knew a woman who was treated poorly by this town. I didn't help her then. I won't make that mistake twice. Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone. Mrs. Pemberton put me to work the next morning, helping in the kitchen in exchange for meals. My hands were steady with a knife, and I could lift the heavy cast-iron pots that made her wince. By noon, she was smiling. "You're a hard worker. Lila, Vernon Blackwood's a fool." The compliment warmed me, but it didn't solve my problem. I had 43 hours left and still owed $47. Rowan returned that afternoon with an elderly man in tow, Doc Henderson, the town physician. The doctor had intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Mrs. Pemberton tells me you're handy with a needle," he said. "I need someone to help prepare bandages and sew up torn surgical linens. $2 for an afternoon's work." I accepted immediately. For 3 hours, I sat in Doc Henderson's office, my fingers flying through the precise stitches he required. The work was familiar. I'd mended everything from torn shirts to ripped grain sacks back in Kansas. Doc paid me at the end, adding an extra 50 cents. "You do fine work. Come back tomorrow if you can." That evening, I counted my money, $3.20 original, plus $2.50 from Doc, $5 and 70 cents total. The math was cruel. I needed $47. Even if I worked for Doc every day, I'd never make enough in time. I was carrying water from the pump the next morning when I heard the whispers. 2 women stood by the mercantile, not bothering to lower their voices as I passed. Living under the same roof as Rowan McGregor, unmarried. Not even 3 days in town, and she's already taken up with a man. Well, what did we expect from someone so unwomanly? My face burned, but I kept walking. Let them talk. I had bigger problems. But the talk reached Vernon Blackwood. He appeared at the boarding house that afternoon with Sheriff Maddox in tow. His face twisted with righteous anger. "You've humiliated me further," Vernon announced loud enough for the street to hear. "Not only did you deceive me, but now you're living in sin with another man, making me look like a fool who couldn't even choose a decent mail-order bride." "I'm not living with anyone," I said, my voice tight. "Mrs. Pemberton runs a respectable—" "I don't care about your excuses." He thrust a new paper at me. "You've damaged my reputation. The original debt of $47 stands, plus an additional $3 for reputational harm. $50 total. And given your immoral behavior, the deadline is now 24 hours, not 48. You can't just change the terms." Sheriff Maddox stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood is within his rights to seek additional damages. The contract you signed gave him legal recourse for any misrepresentation or behavior that reflects poorly on him." I hadn't signed any contract, only exchanged letters. But the sheriff's hand rested on his gun belt. And I understood the real message. The law here was whatever Vernon Blackwood said it was. They left me standing on the porch, trembling with anger and fear. 24 hours, $50, I worked through the night. Doc Henderson let me stay late, preparing supplies. Mrs. Pemberton paid me $1 for scrubbing every floor in the boarding house. I took in mending from 2 sympathetic residents. By dawn, my fingers were bleeding and my eyes burned from lack of sleep. I'd earned $7.35. I still needed $42.65, and I had less than 12 hours left. That's when Rowan knocked on my door, his face grim. He held a sealed envelope, thick with bills. $50, he said quietly. "Take it. Pay Vernon, then get on the next stage out of Pinebrook." "I can't accept it. You don't understand." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I'm not being generous. I'm trying to save your life. A good woman already died in this town because of Vernon Blackwood. I won't let it happen again." I stared at the envelope in Rowan's outstretched hand, my pride warring with desperation. "I don't take charity. It's not charity, it's a loan." His eyes were steady, unwavering. "Pay me back when you can. And if I can't, if I never can—" I met his gaze. "I won't be in debt to another man in this town. I'd rather face jail than owe my freedom." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise. Maybe even respect. He lowered the envelope slowly. "Then work for it. I need help at my lumber operation." "Doing what I don't know how to fell trees." "No, but you can cook. My crew of 12 men have been eating their own terrible attempts at food for months. They're ready to mutiny. 3 meals a day, laundry, mending their work clothes, $2 a day, plus room and board at the logging camp. $2 a day. My arithmetic spun quickly. That was $60 a month, more than enough to pay him back and save for a future. But there was something else in his offer. Something that made my chest tighten with an emotion I didn't dare name. Hope. "Why are you doing this?" I asked again. This time, he answered differently. "I have a daughter, Emma. She's 7 years old, living with her grandparents 50 miles from here. When I look at you, I think about what I'd want someone to do for her if she was ever in trouble. If she was ever treated the way you've been treated." The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. This hard man, all rough edges and silent strength, had a little girl somewhere who needed him. "Where's her mother?" "Dead. 3 years now." He turned toward the door. "The offer stands. We can start today if you want. The money for Vernon, I'll advance it against your wages." I thought of the jail cell waiting for me, of Sheriff Maddox's knowing smirk, of Vernon's triumph. "I accept." Within the hour, I stood in Vernon's store, the $50 counted out on his counter. He examined each bill with excruciating slowness, as if hoping to find one counterfeit. "This settles the debt," I said clearly. "In full." Vernon's jaw worked. "Where did a woman like you get this kind of money so quickly?" "Honest work. Something you might not recognize." His face purpled. But Sheriff Maddox was watching from across the store, and the transaction was legal. Vernon snatched up the bills. "You're paid up. Now get out of my store." I walked out with my head high, past the customers who'd stopped to watch. The weight that had pressed on my chest for 3 days finally lifted. Rowan was waiting outside with a wagon, ready. The logging camp was 5 miles into the pine forest, a cluster of rough cabins surrounding a central cookhouse. The men were giants, all of them broad-shouldered, bearded, their hands scarred from 1,000 splinters. They looked at me with curiosity rather than mockery. "Boys, this is Lila. She'll be cooking for us. You treat her with respect or you answer to me." There were no objections. Within days, I'd established a rhythm. Up before dawn to start the fire and cook breakfast flapjacks, bacon, strong coffee. While the men worked, I'd prepare their midday meal, do laundry in the big copper tubs, mend the constant tears in their flannel shirts and canvas pants. Dinner was stew or roast, beans, cornbread. The work was endless, but it was honest, and I was good at it. The men began leaving tips small coins, sometimes a whole $1. "Best meal I've had in months," one would say. Another, "My shirt's never been mended this neat." Rowan paid me every Saturday. $2 in silver. I gave it right back to him. Payment against my debt. He kept a careful ledger, showing me the declining balance. $50. 48. 46. In the evenings, after the men retreated to their bunks, Rowan and I would sit by the cookhouse fire. He taught me about the forest, how to read the trees, which wood burned hottest, where the elk bedded down at night. I told him about Kansas, about my parents' farm, about the daughter I'd lost to fever when she was barely 3. "Emma," I said softly one night, "you should bring her home. She needs her father. I'm not good at being a father, not anymore. You're better than you think." He looked at me then with something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or something more dangerous. 3 weeks passed. I'd paid back $26. The camp felt like home. The men joked with me, protected me, valued me. Then Mrs. Pemberton arrived at the camp one afternoon, her face pale with urgency. "Rowan," she gasped. "People in town are talking. They're saying Lila is the reason you never brought Emma home, that you chose her over your own daughter. And Vernon's been asking questions about Catherine, about what really happened 3 years ago." Rowan went absolutely still. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. But Rowan, I think he knows. I think he knows Catherine was your sister." The color drained from Rowan's face. Around us, the sounds of the forest bird's song, wind through pine needles, seemed to fade into awful silence. "Sister," I looked between them. "Catherine was your sister, Mrs. Pemberton clutched her shawl tighter. "Oh, Lord. You didn't tell her, Rowan. She deserves to know." "Know what?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "What is everyone talking about?" Rowan stood slowly, his massive frame somehow diminished. "We should go inside." "No." I stayed planted where I was. "Tell me now, who was Catherine?" The old woman's eyes filled with pity for me or for Rowan. I couldn't tell. Catherine McGregor was Rowan's younger sister. She came to Pinebrook 4 years ago as Vernon Blackwood's mail-order bride. The world tilted. Vernon was married before. She was tall like you. Mrs. Pemberton continued, her voice gentle but relentless. Strong, capable. Came from a wealthy family in Denver. Vernon married her for her inheritance, $15,000. Rowan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. But he didn't interrupt. Catherine was too independent for Vernon's liking. She questioned his business dealings, found discrepancies in his account books. She wasn't the meek, obedient wife he'd expected. The landlady's voice dropped. One night, there was a terrible argument. The next morning, Catherine was found at the bottom of the stairs, dead, broken neck. Horror crawled up my spine. An accident. That's what Vernon claimed, what Sheriff Maddox ruled it as. Mrs. Pemberton looked at Rowan with unmistakable sympathy. But there were bruises on her arms, defensive wounds on her hands, and Vernon had scratches on his face he said came from a tree branch. I turned to Rowan, searching his face for denial, finding none. You knew, I whispered. When you saw Vernon reject me at the station, you already knew what kind of man he was. Yes. The single word fell like a stone. And you helped me because the pieces were clicking together now, forming a picture I didn't want to see. You wanted to use me to get close to Vernon, to prove what he did to your sister. Lila. That's why you were at the livery stable that first night. You were watching, waiting. My voice was rising now. 3 weeks of growing trust, curdling into bitter understanding. You didn't help me out of kindness. You helped me because I was useful. That's not... He reached for me, but I stepped back. Isn't it a woman rejected by Vernon, humiliated publicly, desperate for money and shelter? The perfect tool for your revenge. Did you think I'd make him jealous? Make him angry enough to do something stupid, show his true nature? Rowan's silence was answer enough. Mrs. Pemberton tried to intervene. Dear, it's more complicated than... How long were you planning to wait before telling me the truth? I demanded. Or were you never going to tell me at all, just keep me close, keep me grateful, keep me ignorant while you used me as bait? I was going to tell you. Rowan's voice was rough. I needed time. I needed to be sure Vernon would... Would what reveal himself as a murderer, and then what? Rowan, what was your plan? Turn him over to Sheriff Maddox, who's clearly in Vernon's pocket. Take the law into your own hands. I laughed bitterly. And where did I fit in that plan? Was I supposed to testify, disappear? Did it even matter to you? As long as you got your revenge? It matters. He took a step toward me, his eyes desperate. You matter. Everything changed when I got to know you, when I saw your strength, your dignity, the way you refused to be broken. Stop. The word came out cold. Don't pretend this was ever about me. I was a convenient piece on your chessboard. A woman already wronged by Vernon, already vulnerable. You saw an opportunity, and you took it. In the beginning, yes. His admission hit like a physical blow. But Lila, these past 3 weeks were a lie? I was shaking now, from anger or hurt or both. Every kindness, every conversation, every moment I thought we were building trust, it was all part of your manipulation. You're no better than Vernon. He used me for his reputation. You used me for your vendetta. That's not fair. Fair. The word exploded from me. You want to talk about fair? I trusted you. Rowan, I let myself believe that maybe, finally, someone in this godforsaken town saw me as a person instead of a problem or a punchline. And all along, you were just another man using me for his own purposes. Miss Pemberton spoke quietly. Lila, dear, you should know Vernon's been asking questions around town about why Rowan suddenly has an interest in helping mail-order brides, about the connection to Catherine. He's getting suspicious. And when Vernon gets suspicious, people get hurt. Let him be suspicious. I turned away from both of them. I'm done being a pawn in other people's games. Where will you go? Rowan asked. Away from here. Away from you. I still have $24 I paid back to you. That's enough for a stagecoach ticket somewhere, anywhere else. I started toward the cabin to gather my few belongings. Lila, please. You don't understand how dangerous Vernon is. I stopped, looked back over my shoulder. Oh, I understand perfectly. He killed your sister, and you were willing to risk my life to prove it. I understand everything I need to. I walked into the cabin, leaving Rowan standing in the yard looking like I'd struck him. Maybe I had. Maybe we'd struck each other. Either way, the fragile hope I'd built over 3 weeks lay shattered at my feet. I was alone again, just as I'd been when I stepped off that stagecoach. Only now, I'd lost something far more valuable than money. I'd lost the belief that anyone in Pinebrook might actually care about me for who I was. Rather than what I could do for them, I packed my carpetbag in silence, my hands moving mechanically. 3 changes of clothes, a hairbrush, the $24 I'd earned. Everything I owned in the world fit into one worn bag, just as it had when I'd arrived in Pinebrook a month ago. Nothing had changed, except me. I'd been foolish enough to hope. The walk back to town took 2 hours. I didn't let myself cry until I was deep in the forest where no one could see. Even then, the tears came quietly, without sound. I'd learned long ago that tears changed nothing. My daughter's face swam in my memory. Sarah, 3 years old when the fever took her. I'd held her little hand for 2 days straight, begging God to spare her, promising anything, everything. But morning came, and she was gone, her small body cooling in my arms. I'd come west to escape that memory, To start fresh where no one knew about the baby I'd lost, the husband who'd abandoned me when grief made me difficult. The farm foreclosed because I couldn't work it alone. Vernon's rejection should have been just another wound in a body already covered with scars. Instead, it had cracked something open. And Rowan had made me believe the crack could heal, that I could be more than my pain. But it was all a lie. I reached Pinebrook as the sun began its descent. The town was unusually quiet, most folks inside preparing supper. I headed straight for Mrs. Bulk Pemberton's boarding house to collect the few items I'd left there. That's when I smelled smoke. Not cook fire smoke. Something chemical, urgent. I turned toward the town center and saw black smoke billowing above the buildings. People were running now, shouting. I followed the crowd to the source. Vernon's general store was engulfed in flames. Orange tongues licked up the wooden walls, shattering windows with sharp cracks. The heat hit me from 20 feet away. Men formed a bucket brigade from the town pump, but the fire was too far advanced. They were merely wetting the adjacent buildings to prevent the blaze from spreading. "Everyone out," someone shouted. "Vernon's not here, he's at the saloon. Thank God." Then a different voice, high and terrified. "Wait, I saw a child go in there earlier. A little girl?" My blood turned to ice. What a little girl. Sheriff Maddox pushed through the crowd. "I don't know. She was asking for Mr. Blackwood. I pointed her inside about an hour ago, before the fire started." The crowd fell silent, everyone doing the same horrible calculation. An hour ago, before anyone smelled smoke. If a child had been inside when the fire started. Mrs. Pemberton grabbed my arm, her face white. "Oh no. Oh God, no." "What?" I demanded. "Emma, Rowan's Emma. Her grandparents brought her to town yesterday. She wanted to confront Vernon about her mother's death. I thought Rowan talked her out of it. But she didn't need to finish. A 7-year-old girl seeking justice for the mother she barely remembered. Of course she'd gone to Vernon's store. Of course she had. Emma." Rowan's voice tore through the crowd. He must have ridden hard from the camp. His horse was lathered with sweat. He tried to run toward the burning building, but 3 men held him back. "It's suicide. Rowan, let me go, my daughter's in there. The whole structure's about to collapse." I stood frozen, watching Rowan struggle against the men restraining him. Watching the flames consume the building, imagining a small girl inside, terrified, calling for help that would never come. Sarah's face superimposed over Emma's in my mind. Same age, same innocent trust that adults would protect them. I had $24 in my bag, enough for a stagecoach ticket to Denver or San Francisco or anywhere far from Pinebrook and its ghosts. I could walk away. This wasn't my child, wasn't my problem. Rowan had used me, I owed him nothing. But Emma hadn't used me. Emma was a child who'd lost her mother to a violent man and her father to grief. A child who thought she was strong enough to face evil alone. Just like I'd once thought I was strong enough to save my Sarah. I couldn't save Sarah. The fever had been beyond my power, beyond medicine, beyond prayer. But Emma wasn't dead yet. I dropped my carpet bag. Someone nearby had left a wool blanket. I grabbed it and ran to the water trough, plunging it in until it was soaked through. The men at the bucket brigade shouted something, but I couldn't hear them over the roar of flames and the pounding of my own heart. Rowan saw me. Our eyes met across the chaos. He shook his head violently. No. Lila. No. I wrapped the wet blanket around my shoulders and head, covering my nose and mouth. The heat was a living thing, a monster that wanted to devour me. The doorway was a mouth of fire. Through it, I could see the store's interior shelves collapsing, merchandise burning, smoke so thick it looked solid. Somewhere in that hell was a 7-year-old girl. I thought of Sarah one last time. Thought of her hand in mine. Cold and still. Then I ran into the fire. The inside of the burning store was hell made manifest. Smoke choked every breath. Heat seared my exposed skin. I dropped to my knees where the air was slightly clearer and crawled forward. One hand stretched ahead, the other clutching the wet blanket. Emma. My voice was swallowed by the roar of flames. A beam crashed down to my left. Sparks exploded across my vision. I kept moving, feeling my way past burning shelves and melting merchandise. The blanket was already drying, offering less protection with each second. Then I heard it, a weak cough from the back storage room. I found her crumpled behind a pile of flour sacks, unconscious from smoke inhalation. Her small chest still rose and fell. Alive. I wrapped her in the blanket and lifted her onto my shoulder. She weighed nothing. 70 pounds. Maybe. Sarah had been lighter so light that final morning. That's when I saw Vernon. He lay pinned beneath a collapsed shelving unit. His leg twisted at an unnatural angle. His eyes were open, conscious but glazed with pain and smoke. "Leave me," he rasped. "Save the girl." Every instinct screamed to do exactly that. To run. To save Emma and let Vernon burn for what he'd done to Catherine. To me. To everyone he'd hurt. But Emma's weight on my shoulder reminded me of Sarah. And I remembered the promise I'd made to myself standing over my daughter's grave. I will not let anger make me cruel. I will not become what hurt me. I set Emma down gently, grabbed the shelving unit, and pulled. It didn't budge. 200 pounds of wood and iron, my muscles straining against physics. Then I thought of every time someone called me too big, too strong, too masculine. Every sneer at my calloused hands and broad shoulders. Every moment I'd been made to feel like my strength was a flaw. I thought of Rowan teaching me to chop wood, use your strength. Don't be ashamed of it. I braced my legs and lifted. The veins in my neck bulged. My vision went red at the edges. The unit shifted. Rose. I shoved it aside with a grunt that came from somewhere primal. Vernon scrambled backward, dragging his broken leg. I grabbed Emma again, then Vernon's collar, and hauled both of them toward the front door. The building groaned. The ceiling sagged. We burst through the doorway as the roof collapsed behind us, a wave of heat and sparks chasing us into the street. Hands pulled us away from the inferno. Someone threw water on my smoldering blanket. Rowan was there, gathering Emma into his arms, his face streaked with tears. "She's breathing," Doc Henderson confirmed, pressing his ear to Emma's chest. "Smoke inhalation. But she'll recover." I collapsed onto the dirt, coughing violently. My lungs felt scraped raw. Burns covered my arms where the blanket had failed to protect me. Then I passed out. I woke in Doc Henderson's office the next afternoon. Bandages wrapped my forearms. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. Rowan sat in a chair beside my bed, his head in his hands. When he heard me stir, he looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. Emma. I croaked. Sleeping. She'll be fine. Thanks to you. His voice broke. You saved my daughter. After everything I did, after I lied to you, used you, you saved her. I didn't do it for you. He flinched but nodded. I know. That somehow makes it worse. Doc Henderson entered, carrying a tray with tea and broth. You need fluids. Your lungs took a beating. He helped me sit up. There's something you should know. The fire wasn't an accident. I found evidence of arson lamp oil deliberately spread, the back door forced open. Who? My voice was barely a whisper. That's what I'd like to know. Doc glanced at Rowan. Vernon's awake. He's asking for you. Lila. Vernon lay in the adjacent room, his leg in a splint. The arrogant man who'd rejected me at the train station was gone. In his place was someone smaller, broken by more than physical injuries. You saved my life, he said. Why? Because a child's life mattered more than my anger. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. I killed Catherine. Not an accident like I claimed. We argued. She found my ledgers, discovered I'd been embezzling from her family's investment. She threatened to expose me. I pushed her. She fell. I watched her die and did nothing. The confession hung in the air. Finally. The truth. Why tell me this now? Because someone tried to kill me last night. And I think... He swallowed hard. I think it was Sheriff Maddox. We've been partners in corruption for years. If he thinks I'm a liability... Rowan appeared in the doorway. In his hand was a hunting knife. You murdered my sister. His voice was flat, empty. Confessing doesn't change that. Vernon didn't flinch. No, it doesn't. Do what you need to do. I won't stop you. Rowan stepped forward, knife raised. That's when Emma's small voice came from behind him. Papa, don't. She stood in the hallway, pale but steady. Mama wouldn't want you to be a killer. She'd want justice, not revenge. Rowan's hand shook. The knife lowered slightly. Mrs. Pemberton rushed in, breathless. Rowan. Lila, you need to hear this. I know who started the fire, and he's planning to finish what he started tonight. She looked terrified. It was Sheriff Maddox, and he's gathering men right now to burn down the logging camp. With all of you inside, we have maybe 2 hours before nightfall. Mrs. Pemberton said, her normally steady voice trembling. I overheard Maddox at the saloon. He's recruiting men, offering them $5 each to clear out a nest of troublemakers. They think they're just evicting squatters from your lumber camp. Rowan, they don't know he plans to burn it with people inside. Doc Henderson's face went grim. How many men? 6, maybe 7, all armed. Rowan moved toward the door. I need to warn my crew. Get them out. No. The word came from Vernon, surprisingly strong. That's exactly what Maddox wants. You scatter, he picks you off one by one. He's been waiting for an excuse to eliminate you since you started asking questions about Catherine. Then what do you suggest? I asked, my burned arms throbbing. We can't fight 7 armed men. Vernon struggled to sit up. We expose him, force a public confession, make it impossible for him to hide behind his badge. And how do we do that? Rowan's skepticism was clear. We give him what he wants. Vernon met my eyes. We make him think he's won. Doc Henderson caught on first. You want to fake your death? Precisely. I'm already injured, already a liability to Maddox. If he believes I'm died from my injuries in the fire, he'll let his guard down. Come to examine the body and make sure I can't talk. That's insane, Rowan said. It's our only chance. Vernon turned to Doc. You announce I succumbed to smoke damage and internal injuries. Get witnesses, the Reverend, Mrs. Pemberton, anyone Maddox trusts. Make it convincing. I saw the plan forming. And when he comes to confirm you're dead, we have witnesses waiting. People he can't intimidate or kill without exposing himself completely. Vernon's eyes were bright with desperate hope. We force him to confess, or at the very least, reveal his intentions. It's too dangerous, Rowan protested. If it goes wrong, I'm already a dead man. Vernon interrupted. Maddox will kill me whether we do this or not. At least this way. Catherine's death means something. The truth comes out. Doc Henderson was already moving, his physician's mind working through logistics. We'll need the right people. The Reverend Maddox won't suspect him. Mrs. Pemberton. Maybe the school teacher and the telegraph operator. People with credibility. I'll gather them, Mrs. Pemberton said, quietly. What about your logging crew? I asked Rowan. If Maddox's men reach the camp, I'll send word to evacuate before sunset. They can scatter into the forest until this is over. He looked at me. You should go with them. You've done enough. No. I stood despite the pain in my arms. I'm staying. Lila, Vernon's right. If we scatter, Maddox wins. Someone has to see this through. I met Rowan's gaze. Besides, I'm the only one who can testify that Vernon saved Emma's life, that he's trying to make amends. That matters. An hour later, Doc Henderson made his announcement. Vernon Blackwood, age 40, had succumbed to internal injuries sustained in the fire. The body would be prepared for burial in the morning. The news spread through Pinebrook like wildfire itself. We arranged Vernon in Doc's back room, face covered with a sheet, chest still. To the casual observer, he looked dead. But beneath the sheet, his eyes were open, watching. Mrs. Pemberton had quietly assembled our witnesses, Reverend Matthews, schoolteacher Miss Sarah Hartley, telegraph operator Mr. Chen, and the bank manager, Mr. Yates, all the people with standing in the community, all hidden in Doc's storage room with a clear view of Vernon's body. Emma was safely at the church with the Reverend's wife, unaware of what was unfolding. Rowan and I waited with Doc in his office, the door slightly ajar. My heart hammered against my ribs. The burns on my arms stung with each breath. He might not come, I whispered. He'll come, Doc said quietly. He needs to be certain Vernon's dead. Needs to make sure there's nothing incriminating on the body. We didn't have to wait long. Boots on the wooden steps outside. The door opened without a knock. Sheriff Maddox entered, his deputy trailing behind him. Heard about Blackwood, Maddox said, his voice carefully neutral. Terrible tragedy. Mind if I pay my respects? Of course. Doc led him to the back room where Vernon lay. Maddox approached the covered body. I watched through the crack in the door as he lifted the sheet slightly, checking Vernon's face. Satisfied. He lowered it again. Then he did something that confirmed everything. He reached into Vernon's jacket pocket, removing a small leather-bound ledger. Evidence for the inquiry? He said smoothly, pocketing it. That ledger belongs to the deceased's estate, Doc said. And as the law in this town, I'll make sure it's properly cataloged. Maddox turned to leave. Sheriff. Vernon's voice came from beneath the sheet. He sat up. That ledger contains evidence of your corruption, embezzlement, bribery, murder. Maddox's hand flew to his gun, but Rowan was faster, emerging from the office with his hunting rifle aimed at the sheriff's chest. Don't. Rowan's voice was deadly calm. The hidden witnesses emerged from the storage room. 6 pairs of eyes. 6 respectable citizens watching the sheriff's hand hover over his weapon. This is absurd, Maddox said, but sweat beaded on his forehead. Vernon Blackwood is a known liar. I'm a liar who kept detailed records. Vernon stood, swaying slightly on his broken leg. Records of every bribe you took, every crime you covered up, including Catherine McGregor's murder. Maddox's face went purple with rage. You sanctimonious fool. You think these people will believe you over me? I'm the law here. Actually, a new voice said from the doorway. You're not. A man stepped into the room, tall and weathered, a silver star pinned to his vest. Not the tin badge of a local sheriff, this was the 5-pointed star of a U.S. Marshal. Marshal James Corrigan, appointed by the federal court in Denver. I've been investigating reports of corruption in Pine Brook for 6 months. He held up a set of manacles. Sheriff Maddox, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and obstruction of federal justice. Maddox's hand moved lightning fast, drawing his revolver, but he didn't aim at the marshal. He aimed at me. You, he snarled. This all started when you arrived. You should have stayed in that jail cell where you belonged. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. The world slowed to a crawl. I saw the flash from Maddox's gun barrel, saw Rowan's face contort in horror, heard the marshal shout something I couldn't make out. Then Rowan crashed into me, his body a wall of muscle and bone. We hit the floor together as the bullet meant for my heart buried itself in the wooden cabinet behind where I'd been standing. A second shot rang out the marshal's. Maddox crumpled, his gun clattering across the floorboards. The bullet had caught him in the shoulder, the same side he'd aimed at me. Federal officer. Corrigan's voice boomed with authority. Drop your weapon, or the next one goes through your skull. Maddox, clutching his bleeding shoulder, had no fight left. The deputy, who'd stood frozen through the whole confrontation, quickly surrendered his gun. Rowan rolled off me, his hands frantically checking for wounds. Are you hurt? Did he? I'm fine. I was shaking, but whole. You pushed me. You. I wasn't going to let him kill you. His voice was fierce. Not after you saved Emma. Not after. He didn't finish, but his eyes said everything his words couldn't. Marshal Corrigan secured Maddox in manacles, while Doc Henderson examined the sheriff's shoulder wound. He'll live to stand trial, Doc announced grimly. The witnesses emerged fully now, their faces pale but resolute. Reverend Matthews spoke first. We all saw it. Sheriff Maddox drew his weapon with intent to kill Miss Thornton. He confessed to covering up crimes. This isn't hearsay. We're all prepared to testify. Mr. Yates, the bank manager, added. I've suspected financial irregularities for years. Money disappearing from estate accounts. Unexplained deposits in Maddox's name. I documented everything, but was too afraid to speak up. Not anymore. The telegraph operator stepped forward. I have copies of messages Maddox ordered me to destroy. Communications about land fraud, about paying off witnesses. I kept duplicates, hidden. They're yours, Marshal. Corrigan nodded, satisfied. We'll need all your statements. This is going to be a significant federal case. He hauled Maddox to his feet. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt that'll help you much. Maddox spat blood. You think this changes anything? Vernon's still a murderer. He killed his wife. Yes. Vernon's quiet admission silenced the room. He stood with difficulty, his broken leg clearly causing agony. But his voice was steady. I did kill Catherine McGregor. I pushed her down the stairs during an argument. I watched her die and lied about it. Sheriff Maddox helped me cover it up because we were partners in embezzling from the estates of mail-order brides who died or disappeared. The Reverend gasped. How many? Catherine was the fourth. Vernon's face was ashen. But she was different. She fought back. She had family Rowan who wouldn't stop asking questions. The others? They had no one. No one to demand justice. The weight of that confession settled over the room like a shroud. I'm a monster, Vernon continued. I used women, stole from them, and when Catherine threatened to expose me, I killed her. I deserve whatever punishment awaits me. But Maddox, he pointed at the sheriff. Maddox is worse. He wore a badge while facilitating murder. He betrayed the very concept of justice. Marshal Corrigan's expression was granite. You'll both answer for your crimes in federal court. The difference is, Mr. Blackwood, your cooperation and confession will be noted. Sheriff Maddox tried to commit murder in front of witnesses to protect his secrets. That'll be noted too. As the marshal led Maddox out, the corrupt sheriff looked back at me. You should have left when you had the chance. No, I said quietly. You should have been the man your badge demanded you be. After they'd gone, Doc Henderson insisted on examining everyone. My burns from the fire needed fresh bandages. Rowan had bruised ribs from tackling me. Vernon's leg required resetting. The splint had shifted during his confession. While Doc worked, Rowan sat beside me. I need to say something, he began. What I did lying to you, using your situation for my own purposes, it was wrong. I told myself I was pursuing justice for Catherine, but really, I was just consumed by revenge. I saw you as a tool, and that's unforgivable. You're right. It was wrong. I didn't soften my words. But you also gave me work when I was desperate. You protected me. And today, you threw yourself in front of a bullet meant for me. That doesn't excuse. No, it doesn't. But it matters. I looked at him directly. People aren't just one thing. Rowan. Vernon taught me that too. He's a murderer who saved your daughter's life by giving me a job. You're someone who lied to me and then risked your life for mine. I'm a woman who was rejected as worthless, but turned out to be strong enough to pull a man from a burning building. Understanding dawned in his eyes. We're all more complicated than we seem. Exactly. Emma appeared in the doorway, the Reverend's wife behind her. The little girl ran to Rowan, then surprised us both by wrapping her arms around me too. Papa says you saved me from the fire. I did. You do, and you saved the mean man who was mean to you. Yes. She considered this with a child's simple wisdom. That's what heroes do. They save people even when it's hard. Out of the mouths of babes. Vernon called for me before the marshal transported him to the federal detention facility in Denver. He lay on Doc's examination table, his face gray with pain and shame. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said. "But I want you to know, watching you these past weeks, seeing your strength and dignity after how I treated you, it made me look at myself clearly for the first time in years. I saw what I'd become. What happens now? I'll confess everything in court. The embezzlement, Catherine's murder, all of it. The prosecutor says with full cooperation, I might avoid hanging. Life in prison instead." He laughed bitterly. "Some mercy. Vernon, I waited until he met my eyes. What you did was evil. But what you're doing now, telling the truth, accepting consequences, that's the first step toward being human again." His eyes filled with tears. I transferred my assets before the marshal arrived. $8,000 to Emma's name for her education. $4,000 to you and Rowan. The store property to Mrs. Pemberton for a children's home. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's all I have to give. I nodded. There was nothing else to say. As I left his room, Rowan was waiting. "Emma and I are going back to the lumber camp. I need to check on the crew, make sure they're safe." He hesitated. Would you come with us? Not because I'm asking as someone who wants something from you, but because Emma keeps asking for you. And I think she needs you, even if you can never forgive me." I looked at this broken man and his motherless daughter, at the family fractured by tragedy and poor choices. "I'll come," I said. "For Emma." The relief in his eyes was profound. "Thank you." We rode back to the camp together as the sun set over Pine Brook, painting the pine trees gold and crimson. Emma sat between us in the wagon, chattering about everything and nothing. A child's resilience already beginning to heal the trauma. Behind us, the town where I'd been rejected, humiliated, and nearly killed was already receding into memory. Ahead was something I'd never let myself imagine, a future. 3 months later, I stood beside Rowan on our wedding day. The ceremony was simple. Emma as my flower girl, Mrs. Pemberton weeping happily, Doc Henderson officiating. The entire lumber camp attended, along with half of Pine Brook. Even those who'd once whispered cruel things about my size now nodded respectfully. Vernon was serving life in federal prison. Sheriff Maddox faced execution for attempted murder of a federal witness. Justice finally served. As I spoke my vows, I realized something profound. Vernon's rejection at that train station had been the greatest gift of my life. It forced me to discover my own worth instead of seeking it in someone else's approval. Emma hugged me after the ceremony. "You're my mama now, if you want me to be." "I do, because you're brave and strong and you saved me." Rowan took my hand. "I don't deserve you, but I promise to spend every day earning the chance to stand beside you." Our new family wasn't born from perfection. It was forged through pain, mistakes, and the choice to extend grace when vengeance would have been easier. Have you ever been rejected or judged unfairly for something beyond your control? Like Lila was at that train station. How did you find the strength to prove your worth?